To get a full experience of debugging an app or fixing a bug, we should be able to run tests and debug the app locally on our workstation. And this is what we can do with every SecDim play challenges. We can get a Git repository of the challenge locally on our workstation and then run it, test it, debug it, and anytime we fix the security bug, we can push the code and that will run the server testing and we will be given the score for the challenge. We can run these challenges either inside the container or on our host. If we want to run it inside the container, which is simplest and the quickest way, all the dependencies of the app has been already containerized for us and given to us. If we want to run it on the host, we just need to install all those dependencies first before we will be able to run the app. Now, in terms of operating system, if we run these challenges on Linux, we should run firstly a Linux virtual machine, in this example an Ubuntu desktop virtual machine using any hypervisor, let's say VirtualBox, and then you can follow along the commands that I run as part of this guide. For Linux and OS X, you can just follow along this guide. Let's go through one example here. TypeScript, setup.ts, scroll a bit, and you will see this bash command. Now, to prepare our workstation, firstly, we need to add an SSH publicly to our SecDim account. And then we need to install three simple tools: Git, Make, and Docker. Git and Make is available in the majority of the Linux distro and OS X. So the only thing we need to run is Docker. Now, regarding to SSH public key, we need to add it to our account so we would be able to clone those repositories. This bash script effectively does all these things for us. Copy that, head to a terminal, paste, and run. Firstly, it will ask if you have registered an account. Yes. Have you added SSH publicly? No. Have you signed in using GitHub or GitLab? If you have signed in using GitHub and GitHub, this script will not be able to add the SSH publicly to your account. So to add your SSH key manually, you can head to account settings and open SSH key, add or update SSH key, and follow along these basic 4 steps. No. Now the next thing the script does, it will generate a default pair of SSH keys. If these default SSH public key or pair of SSH key has been already generated, or you have already have one, the script will reuse one of those. And the next thing it does, it asks for SecDim username and password so it can upload the SSH publicly to your account. It will then check if the SSH connection is successful, and if so, we would be able to clone these SSH, any repositories from the server. The final step is to install those tools, Git, Make, and Docker. If you already have these tools installed, the script will not attempt to reinstall them. And setup is successfully done. We are good to go. Head back to the challenge. Scroll up. Hit play. Let's do this. Hit clone, copy this Git URL, go back to the terminal, type in Git clone, and paste the URL. In a matter of a second, a copy of a challenge is available to us on our workstation. Now it is like building an app. Open your favorite IDE. In this case, I open Visual Studio Code, and I can start debugging the program. I have the main program, I have the test, security test, usability test. Open a new terminal, type make build. Make build will build the container image which contains the app with all the dependencies, so I don't need to manually install them on my host. And after this is done, we can simply run test, security test, and run the program. Make test will execute usability tests inside the program. And by that, I mean inside the test directory, if you look at the usability test, these are the usability test suite, and it contains two tests. These two tests has been executed as part of this. Make security test will execute the second test file, the security test, and as I expect, this test should fail. The another nice command is make run. This will run the app locally, and this is an example of web application, and we can see there is a server listening on port 8080. Let's go ahead and communicate with this web app. Port 8080, and I've got a response back from this. I can also go to the browser and open a new tab, hitting localhost port 8080 and get the same response out. Now, another interesting command here is that if I run make debug, this will gives me a shell from the container while mapped all the source directory inside the container, which means that if I go and change any of these files here, let's just say test and save this file. Now I can open this file inside the container. So cat controllers and index.ts. I can see that change that I have done has been reflected in a container. So the beauty of this command is I can just run npm test inside the container without even having npm on my host and execute both usability or security tests, or I can just hit npm start to run the app. This will speed up our debugging process. The other command is make push. So here I made a change to the repository. Make push will git add, git commit, and git push the changes that I have done to the remote repository, and it will eventually kick off the server testing. Now in this case, I have not fixed the security bug, so I expect the usability tests to pass, however, security tests to fail. So you can see the server testing is running. Another favorite command that I have is make status. This will fetch the result of the test or the status of the server testing from the server and print it out in a terminal. Let me run this status again. Now you can see that the remaining time for the challenge, I have it right here. The status of the test is failed, and also the test outcome. That as I can see, the usability test, these two tests passed. However, security test, this test failed. Okay, let's now go back, have a look at our main code, try to understand the app. Well, we have one main function. It just requests mapping on root, respond with HTTP 200, and it expects to receive a query parameter called name, and it will return the hello, comma, with that provided query parameters, what we have in the URL address bar. Now, if I look at the usability test, I can see that, well, request to the root, expect to get 200. And if a name parameter, let's say Alice, is provided, it expects to see Alice in the response. So we saw that this test all passed. Just verify that again. Let's just try this also ourselves. Here I'm gonna run the app. Go back to the browser anytime this is now started to run. Can go back to the browser. And let's just give it a name parameter. And whatever I provided in the input, I can see it in output. So what can go wrong with this program or this pattern of whatever I've been given in the input is now being echoed back in the output? Well, let's go back and see the security tests. Effectively, these tests are failing. And this is a quite interesting part, because now we can learn, firstly, what an attacker could potentially enter. So an attacker can enter, instead of Alice or SecDim, they can enter a script tag following a JavaScript function to the program. Well, before we dive into the code more, let's just copy this and pop this back to the browser and see what will happen if we run this. Well, that given JavaScript function got executed. Now, if we look at the test title, it also gives us some hint that what could be this vulnerability about, and this is called XSS, or reflected cross-site scripting. Now, the other beauty thing about this program is that, or this test is that, it will also tell us how we should prevent this security issue, or one of the recommended way to address this security issue. And this is by expecting this string that we can see here. Now, if we look closely, we can see some of the special or unsafe HTML characters are encoded to the HTML equivalent. So just a side story here, one of the techniques to address reflected cross-site scripting is output encoding. And by doing so, we will look at where this input is being rendered back to the user. In this case is inside the HTML context, and we perform an escaping based on the context. So as you can see from the title, it says it should return the escape HTML. And for those of you who are more curious to learn more about cross-site scripting and what else can go wrong, or what are the possible way, you can always search for these CWE identifiers. These CWEs will give us more detail around what this bug is about, what type of these bugs are about, and a few more examples in this page. All right, so now we know that our program should return this given this input. So let's just go and make a quick fix for that. Let's go to the controller. Now what we need to do here is to effectively make sure whatever comes in as name, it first go through that encoding process. Now, one way is to introduce a new function, and an example function has been given to us inside the guide, so readme.adoc file. And copy this and go back here and try to put this function anywhere in the code, perhaps here. And also let's make a call to this function. So anytime this name is being rendered, I want to make sure it has been escaped. So what does this function does is very simple. It goes through, given the HTML context, the string, the given string, and it will replace these special characters with HTML encoded equivalent. Let's get rid of this typo here, save this and run security tests. And I expect, well, yeah, all the security tests have passed. Let's just also run usability tests, making sure we have not broken anything. Well, all the functionality usability tests also passed. But let's just see how the program now behaves. Let's run it and go back to the browser. So running the same payload, and this time I'll get these things out. The JavaScript code was not executed because all these unsafe HTML characters now being encoded. Well, time to make push and get the score for this challenge. And now it goes through the security tests, and this time we got a nice pass and we have passed this challenge.